Have you started noticing it? More and more men around you, friends, colleagues, brothers, are choosing to remain single. Not for a few months between relationships, but for years, sometimes indefinitely. And here's what's interesting. It's not because they've given up on human connection or decided they hate companionship. The reality is far more nuanced, far more human than that. What we're witnessing is a quiet retreat, a stepping back from the dating world that isn't driven by bitterness or apathy, but by exhaustion, by self-preservation, by a calculated decision that, for many men, staying single feels safer, saner, and more sustainable than continuing to play a game where the rules seem impossibly stacked against them. Let's start with something fundamental that often goes unspoken: the exhaustion of constant performance. Many men today describe modern relationships as feeling less like partnerships and more like auditions that never end. There's this unrelenting pressure to prove your worth. Not once, not during courtship, but continuously, indefinitely. You must be emotionally available, but not needy. Strong, but vulnerable. Ambitious and successful, but still present and attentive. Confident, but humble. The list of contradictions goes on. Affection, which should flow naturally between two people who care about each other, starts to feel transactional. It becomes something you earn through maintaining this impossible balancing act. Miss a step, show a crack in the performance, have an off week, and suddenly you're not man enough, or you're not the person I thought you were. This isn't about men wanting to avoid effort or commitment. It's about the fundamental unfairness of feeling like love is a prize you have to win again and again, every single day, rather than something built together through mutual care and respect. Eventually, that treadmill becomes unbearable. The question becomes, why keep running when the finish line keeps moving? Then there's the vulnerability problem, one of the most painful contradictions men face in modern dating culture. We live in an era where emotional intelligence is celebrated in theory. Men are told, correctly, that they need to open up, share their feelings, be emotionally honest. Vulnerability is supposed to be strength, right? That's the message everywhere, in articles, in therapy offices, in social media posts. But here's what many men experience in practice. When they actually do open up, when they share their fears, their insecurities, their moments of genuine struggle, something shifts. Sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's gradual, but they watch their partner's attraction fade. They hear their emotional confessions used against them later in arguments. They feel themselves being quietly reassessed, found wanting, subtly emasculated for daring to be human. Or worse, their vulnerability gets met with dismissal, with "man up," or "don't be so sensitive," or "I need you to be strong right now." The very thing they were told to do, be emotionally open, becomes the thing that makes them undesirable or burdensome. After experiencing this enough times, the lesson becomes crystal clear. Emotional honesty is a trap. It's safer to keep your struggles to yourself, to present only the confident, unshakable version of yourself. But that kind of emotional isolation, it's exhausting, and it makes genuine intimacy impossible. So some men decide, if authentic connection isn't actually on the table, why bother pretending? For some men, the choice to stay single isn't philosophical, it's protective. It comes from a place of deep hurt. Many have loved with everything they had. They invested fully, opened themselves completely, built their world around someone who promised to stay. And then it fell apart. Maybe through betrayal, maybe through a gradual drifting, maybe through loss they couldn't control. But the pain of that ending was so profound that it fundamentally changed them. These aren't men who don't want love. They're men who know exactly how devastating it feels to lose it. They remember what it's like to be shattered, to question everything about themselves, to spend months or years putting the pieces back together. Their hearts aren't closed. They're protected, guarded, treated like something precious and breakable, because they know from experience that they are. There's a particular kind of emotional scar tissue that forms when you've survived heartbreak. It makes you more cautious, more selective, less willing to jump in without certainty. And in a dating culture that often feels casual, disposable, and commitment-averse, finding that level of certainty feels nearly impossible. So they wait, not for someone perfect, but for someone who feels safe enough to risk everything again. And until that arrives, if it ever does, being alone feels infinitely preferable to being hurt like that again. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Many men are choosing singlehood not as an escape, but as an investment in themselves. After years of being told their value is measured by their utility, how much they earn, what they provide, what they achieve, some men reach a point where they need to rebuild from the ground up. They're working on careers that demand focus. They're addressing mental health issues that were ignored for too long. They're establishing financial stability after years of struggling. They're rediscovering who they are outside of other people's expectations. This kind of deep personal reconstruction requires time, energy, and emotional bandwidth. Adding a relationship into that equation isn't just inconvenient. It can feel genuinely threatening to the progress they're making. Because relationships, especially complicated or unstable ones, are consuming. They pull your focus. They drain your energy. And if you're barely holding yourself together, the additional weight can be crushing. These men aren't avoiding relationships because they're selfish or commitment phobic. They're making a calculated decision that their own well-being and development has to come first, that they can't pour from an empty cup, that they need to be whole on their own before they can be part of something healthy with someone else. And honestly, that's not just reasonable, it's wise. But it does mean staying single, sometimes for years, while that work gets done. Even for men who are emotionally healthy and genuinely ready for connection, modern dating itself has become an obstacle. It often feels like taking a test where nobody tells you the rules. The grading criteria change halfway through, and half the answers that were right last time are somehow wrong now. Are we dating or just hanging out? Is this exclusive or are we keeping options open? Should I text first or wait? Be direct about my intentions or play it cool? Show genuine interest or maintain mysterious distance? The contradictions are maddening. Women say they want honesty, but what are we? Conversations are considered pressure. They want effort, but trying too hard is desperate. They want confidence, but certainty is arrogance. They want emotional availability, but too much vulnerability is weakness. And beneath all of this is a layer of suspicion and game playing that makes authentic connection feel impossible. People ghost without explanation. They keep backup options while claiming to want something serious. They present carefully curated versions of themselves that bear little resemblance to reality. Dating apps turn human connection into a shopping experience where everyone is perpetually looking for the next best option. For men navigating this landscape, especially after already dealing with performance pressure, vulnerability risks, and past hurts, it starts to feel genuinely hopeless. Not because they can't find someone, but because the whole system feels designed to prevent real connection from forming. So they opt out, not with anger, but with resignation. And finally, there's a simpler truth that deserves acknowledgement. For some men, being single just feels better, not as a defensive position or a temporary retreat, but as a genuinely preferred state of being. They've discovered a kind of peace in solitude, freedom from drama, from emotional labor, from constantly negotiating and compromising and managing someone else's expectations alongside their own. They have friendships that fulfill their need for connection. They have hobbies and passions that bring meaning. They have autonomy over their time, their space, their choices. And when they weigh that against what modern relationships often demand, the uncertainty, the games, the performance, the risk, staying single just makes sense. This isn't giving up. It's choosing themselves. It's deciding that an authentic, peaceful life alone is better than an exhausting, inauthentic life coupled. And in a culture that still tells men their value comes from conquest and partnership, making that choice takes genuine courage. So when you see men increasingly choosing long-term singlehood, understand, it's not about rejecting love or connection. It's about protecting their peace, their sanity, and their sense of self in a dating landscape that often feels hostile to all three. And until that changes, many will continue choosing the quiet dignity of solitude over relationships that ask them to be anything less than fully human.